Welcome to a new video of Seibert Media. This is a long video. As if you're watching the recording, you'll probably see that. The best thing I can say is I'm hoping that the content of this video will be worthwhile watching. I do think it's pretty unique because I myself are in search of companies sharing their agile transition stories and what worked and what didn't openly and without all the marketing fuss of trying to sell something. This is what I'm embarking on for this video. A good thing from a marketing perspective is it's following our English first marketing content strategy. So I'm recording this first in English. And now there is some bad things or disclaimers that I have to say is all of what I've prepared so far is German. So you'll see German slides. I prepared German speaker notes. So please bear with me when I'm searching for words. I'm not a native English speaker as well. So I may have trouble translating my native German stuff into the English language while recording this. At the same time, I'm hoping for making this insightful for you and interesting. So please stick with me, although it's a long video. There's more obstacles that I have to surmount. I can't share my screen and show the video at the same time. So you can see me now. You'll be able to see me in the end. Maybe I'll switch sometimes in between, but actually it's mainly going to be a video with slides on it. If you're watching it later, like not right after I record it, maybe in a couple of days, I will have English slides as well. So on the very first slide, you'll see a link to a page, and from there you'll be able to go to the English page and then find the English slides as soon as they're up. So if you're specifically interested in the slides, there's going to be an English version, but in most cases it's only a picture and a couple of words, and I hope that with my commentary you'll be able to get over that they are German right now. The whole thing is in preparation for a big insurance company that I'm going to give a talk tomorrow, and this is kind of a practice dry run that I'm doing. I regularly do it. So I'm recording this in English to generate some English content around this. And oh, I see, I should be putting that in the back. I'm hoping that this is helpful. So if you're watching this video and you think it is helpful, please give me a comment and tell me, because I'll then know in the future that I want to keep this up. And if you think it sucks and doesn't work at all for you, please give me a comment as well. It'll demote me from redoing that. One challenge that I also have is I have to look at the notes here, because I can't do the presenter notes on the screen because it would be recorded and then the slide would be wrecked and so on. So a couple of technical challenges for this recording. Without further ado, I'll just start. Let me share my screen for that. So whole screen, switching to the presentation. Actually, we're about to have like 70 slides. It's gonna take a while. The slides are public, and it's about agile organization, or I know that in the English ecosystem, it's also called enterprise Scrum in big enterprises, large organizations. And this presentation is focusing on what you can do as an employee if your company is in a transition phase. And like a lot of people are frustrated and they think, oh, everyone's talking agile, but we're not behaving agile. And I'm trying to give some insights on how I think you can behave as an employee and how you may be able to think so that all of this doesn't matter that much. Some background about Seibert Media: we are 150 people, mostly in Germany, with some people in USA. Last year, we did 26 million euros in revenues. We're earning money by reselling and producing software for Atlassian, Google, and we're doing basically it's companies that want to become more agile. So I've put agile as well, but basically we're trying to help teams work better together with software. So much about Seibert Media. The agile development, the enterprise Scrum agile organization thing at Seibert Media was like a wave. It started pretty early, maybe in the 2000s, when we started to embark on agile practices in software development. And then we still kept a very patriarchic, hierarchical company until probably 2009. The company was founded by my brother and myself in 1996. And since 2009, I would say that we really practiced Scrum and started to become agile as a company. I'd still say we're in a transitioning phase, but we do have a lot of companies coming to Seibert Media to see how we work together because they think it's very agile. So we're probably already at a pretty high level of agile organization in our company. So if you're searching for a red line or a guide or the perfect story in this presentation, you may be disappointed because this is more of a box of popcorn where we created, with the insurance company that I prepared this talk, I gave them a couple of questions and they were asking those questions to their employees, and those employees would answer, and they would say, what do I expect of a talk that will help me to help us as a company? What are my expectations? What are things that are working fine in our organization already? What does suck? And they gave me feedback, and I used this feedback to populate contents for this presentation. So it's very widespread. It's a lot of different things that I'm going to be talking about. And please bear with me if the jumping from one content to another is too far-fetched. It's not intentional. I've been trying to make it like a good story, but I don't think that I'll do without any of those jumps. So the first question that obviously needs to be talked of, and a lot of people have been talking about this, so I'll try to be brief. And I'm also leaning towards Silke Hermann and Nils Pfleging, who I know personally. And so the question is, what is Agile and why should we do that? And the picture of this red lady and the blue robot explain that pretty nicely. So there's a difference between complicated things, and that's what the robot can do, and complex things, and that's something that only humans can do. To solve complex things, you have to have ideas. The right question, if you want to solve complex problems, is who can do it? And complicated things can be mastered by algorithms, by robots, by computer software. And to solve complicated things, the right question is, how can we solve that? And there's a big difference between how can we solve that and who can solve that. And understanding that difference is a big jump in understanding what Agile is and what is only masked or covered as Agile practice, but actually something else that people want to sell you as such. There's a lot of citations. I have like German citations from employees who were complaining about that people would abuse this and so on. I'm not going to read that out. I'm planning to read out some of that during my talk, but I'll skip that here because it would mean that I would have to translate that right here, and I think it's cumbersome. So let's look at the Taylor bathtub. Frederick Winslow Taylor helped coin a term. He said, like, I think his term was the science or scientific management. So he was trying to separate the thinker from the doer. And this is something that was very interesting in the time starting at 1850 to 1900, when the Industrial Revolution would really kick in, and you'd have a market that would have benefit a lot of economies of scale, and by standardizing things in a factory, for example. And the cheaper you could produce something, the higher your profits and margin would be. And the theory of the Taylor bathtub is that this ended probably at 1970 something. And today we're in a world where economies of scale really don't make a very big differentiator anymore. So you have to be better, more innovative, more insightful, more spot on to be successful in a market. And just being cheap and efficient doesn't cut it anymore. And I think, like, the overall notion is something that even big insurance companies understand and acknowledge today. And the management that most companies employ today is blue management. It's deterministic. It's trying to make sure that we predict the future. We say how tomorrow is going to be, and we stick to the plan. We try to enforce compliance to the plan and our planning process. And the red, which is predominant today, is something that this management is weak at, where you need to have ideas, you need to be flexible, you need to have business agility, where you like react to surprises very quickly and adapt to false assumptions that you had. And that's something that humans really can do well. And becoming and being agile means to give back freedom of adapting and making decisions to humans, and using the robot-like management style of Frederick Winslow Taylor only for the routine jobs. So there is a space where we still need automation, and the whole digitization thing, and especially in the industry, like we're a manufacturing industry, there's a huge potential for that. But if you're talking about projects, you need to make sure that humans become way more productive, and that's what Agile can do. Like a classical element of this Taylorism is that you have an upper management and the employees on the bottom. The people, the managers on top, they think, and the people on the bottom, they do. And this is separated. And you do need this hierarchical thing today still for compliance, to be for not violating laws, and for making sure that things, that external boundaries that you have to comply with, that they are not violated in your company. That's what the hierarchy is for. Then there's what Nils Fliegen calls informal structure, where people have relations with one another, they trust one another, and that's something that helps information flow and increasing transparency, even in a world where transparency is not very commonplace. And it's also like, social attribution, reputation, and so on. And then there's a third structure, which Niels calls the peach organization or cell structure, where you have individual cells of teams. They're inside of the organization. Then you have in the center, you have central like shared services things. This could be, for example, IT, or maybe also like um, HR and those things. But they only support the cells in the periphery. And outside of the organization is the customer. And the customer is leading the thing. He is independently and autonomously serviced by the cell, and the cell only takes support from central elements when this is needed. So when I said IT or HR could be central services, it's actually only could be because, for example, in a cell, you'll have things like recruiting, and they may do that all autonomously themselves, and then they don't need any services from HR, and HR may actually be evaporated in the center. So the role of the center here, and this is very much different from what Taylorism tells you, is not mighty. Mighty is outside, and inside of the Peach organization is only servicing functions. That may also die if the organization or those cells in the periphery don't need this service anymore. So we call that internally as well Pfirsich organization, which is basically a German translation of Peach organization. And we try to onboard people as well and tell them, look, the market, the customers out there, this is what is important for us. And we're trying to support the periphery from the central center or the core of the organization. Actually, the leaf is just trying to make it look like a peach. It doesn't have a role in itself. This is a very old first draft of trying to make sure that people can translate this speech into our real organization. There's still things that we have in the center today, but especially those roles have been decreasing in the past months significantly. And in the periphery, we've been growing dramatically and having both added more autonomy to those teams and also more teams. Here's a relationship between those three. They are interdependent, and you need all of them. But I think the main message is hierarchy is only for compliance. If you want to have value creation, you have to look at the cells, and you also have to organize your company as cells. I know that most companies, especially very big companies, are far away from this organization, and they truly live in this organization. And it's not an easy way to jump from here to here for value creation. And it's also not my ask for this talk. It's just like in the beginning, it's helpful to understand that there are those three different forms of organization that are taking effect all the time in your organization. And you're most likely, if you have a very traditional organization today, you're ignoring those two, which is a big problem because those two will help you dramatically to solve red people problems that can be solved by asking who can solve it. I'll skip that because I only wanted to put this up for people to read, and as it's all German, it doesn't make any sense. Something else that I wanted to add on this is like the assumption of how people are is a very big indicator of how fit your organization is to transition from a classical command and control management style to a more participatory, agile organization style that trusts people to make their own decisions. And the basic question is, do you believe that your employees in your company, are they mules or are they smart people? Do you think that they are a little bit stupid and lazy and focused on their own advantage all the time, and maybe even do things that will hurt the company just to bring some advantage to themselves. If that is the way you think about employees, you're probably looking at a lot of employees as mules. And the truth actually is that all employees in a company are smart people, and there are no such things as those mules or Esel in German. Um, and this Pfleging is deriving that from a very old book from Edward Deming from, I think, 1960s. It was The Human Side of the Enterprise. And he had a very good differentiation between what he called theory X and theory Y, where he said there are no theory X people. Actually, the system is what makes people behave like mules, or at least it looks as if they were mules. If you're looking at the system and how the system teaches people to be, you find out that most people that look like a mule doing bullshit in the company are actually behaving efficiently and effectively within the system that they see. For example, if you have bonuses and individual targets, people following those targets will sometimes look as if they were behaving irrationally, but actually behaving rationally, given that they are paid an extra to follow those targets that may be outdated, for example. Niels has a very good comparison between what he calls alpha organizations, which is the command and control style, like the red one, and beta codex or beta organization is how he calls those agile companies. And then he has 12 laws of organization, and the difference between purpose and dependency, for example, between beta and alpha. Also, this slide really only makes sense if you look at the English translation later. So at this point, I'm sorry for not putting that up. This is also available in English. It's a list of practices that Niels has put up to make sure that you understand that there's a lot of obsolete, old style command and control management practices that you can simply abandon. You can simply put them on the garbage heap of management method or management history, I think he says. And it's, for a lot of people, it's frightening, but at the same time, I think it's a pretty relieving message, because you can simply stop doing stuff and things will improve dramatically. It's the frightening thing is that a lot of people think, oh, but if we stop doing all of this, people will stop working. They will not follow our shared goals anymore. But the risk of looking if this really happens is pretty worthwhile. That's a good slide of Niels showing that there's a lot of very, very big companies who do that today. Like if you're from the US, for example, you probably know Southwest Airlines, and you'll know a lot of other logos that you see here. And those companies, they have decided for themselves a long time ago that they want to put trust in their employees, give their employees the freedom to do decisions on their own. Don't put them in a small box of rules that they have to follow, but give them the freedom to do decisions on their own and really excel in a complex world. And the message is basically, you can be one of these companies no matter which industry you're in. If it's retail, if it's manufacturing, if it's services, if it's a governmental or an NGO company, this beta organization, as Niels calls it, is a good choice for all industries. And I truly believe that this is true. So there's a complexity tools book, complexity tool in German. I think if you're searching for that, you'll find the English book as well, or you'll have to wait for the English slides. And then here's my box of popcorn, or at least the start of it. My brother met a customer a couple of years ago, and he told him in a heavy German dialect, "Oh, I got it now. What you're meaning is you're just mingling through. Like you're trying to make the best out of the situation. You're just looking at the problem, and then you do the next step that looks as if it makes sense." And it's basically as simple as that. Agile means that you're doing the right thing in this situation, and that you omit or deliberately not plan for the future too much. You try to prepare on what may happen and have a couple of probabilities in your head, and try to make sure that you can work on them. But basically, you're always asking yourself, what's the right decision in this very moment? And it also means that you let employees who are very close to the problem take the decision on what to do with this problem. And so one of the first questions that we're asking is that real? Like a litmus test of, do I really, the idea was to look at this from an employee perspective, right? So the first check that you'll have to make is, how much does the organization that I'm in really want to become agile? Because it takes a long time to change habits in an organization. And the culture, as a kind of shadow of how your organization works, will always reflect past behavior. So if you want to change that culture to become more participatory, to give more freedom to make their own decisions to employees, you'll have to practice this for a long time to make sure that it actually happens. And the organization as a system in itself will try to fight it, because like the past tells that this organization does things differently. And if you now try to do this new participatory approach, it may not suit well with your culture. And people find themselves stuck in the middle. They think, oh, they tell me they want to be agile, but what I'm experiencing here is not agility. So the question is, should I play along? Should I be a thriving force to make sure that this agile really takes place in our company and we get this going? Or should I just stay put and wait? And it's not that easy to differentiate between being agile and buying agile. And I think there, Adam Grant has a very good explanation of how you can differentiate how you should behave. Like it's a book called Give and Take, and he has different people, like a giver, a taker, and a matcher. The giver unconditionally gives all the time. The matcher tries to balance giving and taking from others so that they are in balance. And the taker is trying to unilaterally take and have his own advantage in mind. And what Adam Grant says is the most successful strategy is if you're a giver, but only in the situation when you're looking at the matcher, you're becoming a matcher yourself. So you're a giver when you work with other givers. You're a giver if you're working with other matchers, because they are going to try to match your giving. But if you're working with takers, you switch the strategy and now become a matcher. So you find out, oh, the other is only taking, so I'm asking them for reciprocity. So that's, in my opinion, a very good strategy to answer, is that real? Should I play along? Should I be a driving force for that? And like, wherever you feel this is real, you're trying to push along and drive it. And wherever you feel this is only a theater, you'll just play along. You just like do what is best for you and for your behavior within the system. And you don't take too much care about what the agile thing in the organization will be, because it's most likely going to be in vain. And Adam Grant says, don't be a doormat, because the giver that stays with the tactic of giving while looking at matches, he'll be like exploited by the taker. That's also a very nice picture that I've from Lars Vollmer, a German author, and he's calling that like where people behave as if they would do something, but the actual value creation is somewhere else. He's calling that the main stage and the backstage. And the business theater takes place on the main stage, and the value creation and the real work takes place in the backstage. And understanding that there's two different things. Like for most companies, meetings are the main stage. Most meetings only consist of business theater. So if you be there, your role is to play a role in this business theater. There's a long list of tactics that you can use, but understanding that there's a difference between business theater and real value creation is helping, in my opinion, already. Then there's team dynamics. I'll have to look up the author because that's going to help those people who are interested in it. Bruce Tuckman has been writing about team dynamics in 1965 already. Tuckman's Stages of Group Development is the Wikipedia article that you might want to look in the speaker's notes or just search on Google. And one of the main findings that I have to like in my talk to make sure that people understand what the difference between agile and not being agile is you really have to have a team. And this team has to work on problems of a customer independently and autonomously. There's a big difference between a group of people and a team. A team can solve the whole problem. A group of people will only solve one part of the process. For example, if you're an insurance company and you get people to report damages that they have, a group of people may look whether they try to trick you and just get the money out of the insurance, or if they actually have a damage that is valid and that needs payment. And if you're just a group of those people, you can forget all of the group dynamics or team dynamics, because you are no team. You're just a group of people. And that's also like from an agile perspective, that's difficult because it may be the right thing to have an efficient way of doing things, but you're still pretending that efficiency is what it takes. And I would say, like, if efficiency is what it takes, why don't you take the robot? Why don't you use machine learning and artificial intelligence and all the digital era things to do the stuff that can be automated, and then have teams take care of the rest with a higher level of automation, for example, which is probably then again way more in line of what even classical managers in an insurance company may think. So the question is now for an insurance company and their employees, how do I transition from a group of people who are always processing cases to a team that autonomously takes care of the whole process? And this is obviously something that you can't do totally on alone. It's an organizational physics and design thing. So as an employee, my recommendation would be to try to be part of efforts that think about how this could be done, or even be yourself a driving force of thinking about this. Thinking about corporate culture is probably helpful for companies. The first thing for this slide for me is you need to understand that culture is like a shadow of your past behavior. So it's very difficult to try to influence your culture. But what you can do is you can analyze your current culture. There's a good body of research from William Schneider, who has created a couple of cultural models, collaboration style, control style, competency style, and cultivative style. And then you can kind of take it from there and understand what is my current culture in my organization and what do I need for the future to have to cope with the problems of tomorrow. And then you can try to derive behaviors that may buy or play into that shift that you want to take and focus on changing those behaviors first. So it is helpful to deal with corporate culture, but it's not helpful to try to influence directly. In the survey that we did with employees of this insurance company, a lot of them were complaining that agile was a bogus term for whatever people wanted it to be. So they would call a phone call with the customer agile, or they would require employees to be agile and work the weekend, or to work longer, or to work faster. And people were kind of upset that agile would be used to exploit them as like a lemon that you press in the juice press and try to get as much liquid out of it as possible. And like the idea that the employees had were they are using my wish for a more participatory management style to make me invest more in the company to exploit me. And this is actually a possible strategy, because giving freedom to people, leading to more engagement on their side, will benefit the company. And that's basically what my whole talk is about. I would say, like, this talk is for a very big insurance company, and those big companies, they have zero interest in deploying a short-term strategy and exploiting people. Like exploitation 2.0, as I put it on this slide, is definitely leading towards a short-term optimization and will not work well in a long-term environment. So yeah, I think it's just like a conspiracy theory thing that you just have to drop as an employee. If you're thinking that your employer will use agile just to exploit you, look at his business numbers. Is he in need of doing that? Probably not. And so I think this is something that you can drop. Something that you cannot drop is, and this is kind of like the next slides also help me to differentiate between where agile companies should be and where big companies actually are. The elephant in the room is always like, who gets what salary? And this is not transparent in most big companies. But if you're in an agile organization, you want people to do a lot of things, and they will need information for that to make good decisions. For example, if you're peer recruiting, which you should be doing, like if the team is recruiting their new employees on alone, which is a very central thing to agile practices, in my opinion, then they need to know, what am I earning? What is everyone else on the team earning? And how much can now we pay to this new applicant? And if you don't have this transparency, it's very difficult for them to make the call. And what we see is that in a lot of companies, that transparency is not available, which is a problem. Then you also have like a lot of people who yeah, as I said, they're using agile to convey and put forward other things. And the best strategy that I have for that is the give and take thing, like be a giver, become a matcher once you hit a taker. I've put up this slide especially because I have like probably 15 citations of what people said. So not that helpful in English version here. Augenhöhe is actually a term that I can't translate. It's what it means is that you're working with respect, like on the same eye level. You don't try to put forward hierarchical differences. And it's mainly something that goes to the managers in the audience. So it's very difficult if you're the subordinate to tell the others, please respect me. It's only the manager can do that. But it's Ricardo Zemler is a Brazilian, I think, entrepreneur, and he has been very successful with a organizational style in his company that was very flat, and people could recruit themselves like in teams. They would define their own salary levels, and Zemco has become very successful with this. One of the first companies to employ agile practices, in my opinion. And yeah, this is probably something that people need to make sure that they can bear this when this doesn't happen. It doesn't mean that the company is not agile yet. It just means that they still have kind of old style managers. And it's difficult for those managers because, as I've explained earlier, the hierarchy and the value creation pitch organization, they once you focus on the autonomous teams and the periphery with their teams, it's very difficult for the middle manager because the hierarchy becomes very, very flat. And if you're a middle manager, you'll most likely going to become a team member then. And then the justification of your higher salary that you have today by hierarchy and being mighty vanishes. And it's a threat. What we do see is in the short and midterm run, those middle managers, no one gets a salary decrease or demotion on that end. But it's still like you now have to do better work in the team with the team to justify getting salary increases in the future. So please bear with those middle managers. They are threatened the most. And if they misbehave, it's maybe just a response to the stress that an agile transition puts on them. The discovery of electric fences is something that Donald Reinhardt was creating, and it's a very interesting thing that the more agile your company becomes, the more important it is to make sure that they understand the boundaries. And I think that classical companies can also become better at telling employees what is okay to do and what is not okay to do. I'll come back to this later when we're talking about a who may do what board. It's just like at this point, it's important to make it explicit what people can do and what they can't do. And something that is also important for an agile company, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a challenge for those big enterprises and an enterprise that I'm talking to tomorrow, that performance reviews, bonuses, and individual targets that are tied to payments, they are toxic. This is something that the existence of those things is almost a guarantee for agile not to take roots. So as long as you are unable to get rid of those individual payments, agile will always have a very bad positioning um, in the pursuit of trying to change behavior for the better and for agile in the long run. And it's a challenge. It's something that is not easy to solve in a big company when the payment of 10,000 people is dependent or is structured in a way where a significant part of that is an individual bonus. Especially in sales organizations and so on, this is very, very common. And there's a lot of solutions and ideas that are out there to change that, to make sure that people can behave in an agile way. But the first thing that you have to instill, and this is also, again, something that only management can do, is the will to think about that and to understand that this is not helping, but hurting the organization. And it's something that I can't change in this presentation. Then that was interesting. One question was, why should we do agile? Can we just do the boring, simple things? Can we just put this block onto the other because that's needed? They were talking about an IT system that would send emails, or a phone system that they would use to call and receive calls, and it didn't work as reliably as they wanted. And they said, why can't we just fix those silly problems until we go after the very big things? And I've been thinking a lot about this. It's a very good question. And my answer on this would be, as a company, you have to focus on the hard stuff because the easy stuff will fall into place easily. So it's not difficult to run a phone system for 10,000 people. It's something that needs your attention, and it's probably not automatically going the way you need it as a company, but this is a complicated problem. The complex problem of changing your organization's culture to reflect past behavior that has significantly changed from the past is a task that is so much more complex that this is, in my opinion, something that companies should focus on. And it is okay to do a poor job in some other areas, although obviously no one wants that. And I'm wishing this company that they'll fix those easier things. And something that is connected to that is a lot of feedback that I got in the survey was about the difference between discipline, bureaucracy, and chaos. Let me give you a couple of ideas about this. Like, if you're doing agile, it doesn't mean that you can drop discipline. Actually, I think it's the opposite. If you want to do or to be fully agile, you have to be more disciplined than before, because you have to take into account all of the easy fallacies and wrong turns that you've done in the past. There is still room for bureaucracy, And especially when it comes to things that require routines and efficiency, processes and guidelines really do help. I do think that becoming an agile company also means that you understand that those guidelines and this bureaucracy is there to be not be adhered to. So there will always be situations where it's much smarter for the organization not to follow the rule, but to make an exception. And accepting this fact and allowing um, employees in such routine jobs to make this call is actually improving the value creation process of your company dramatically, in my opinion. So bureaucracy will stay, but the ability to deviate from the rule is something that needs to be bred. And this is something that employees can do themselves as well. Like, just don't follow the rule. If this is the right call, if this is what the company moves ahead or uh, creates more value. And then the last thing, chaos, which the picture is about, is something that a lot of people, they think we're in a big company, we need to be tidy and tedious and everything needs to have its place. And this is wrong. Like in an agile company, chaos is prevalent, it's pervasive, it's like things change, people are surprised, and embracing this change, embracing this chaos is part of agility. Agility means that you prepare to be surprised, that you prepare to change the plan, that you prepare that your assumptions are wrong, that you're willing to change what you thought were your plan yesterday, tomorrow. And this happens a lot. And those surprises and those needs for change, they increase dramatically. And so chaos is something that you should embrace. Then there's something that Silke, Hermann, and Nils Wiggen call rite of passage. And it's the pain that you have if you try to change from a traditional style command and control to agile or beta, as they call it. And it's also a slide that I put up because there are like 12 or 15 awesome citations of people who have been like complaining about this pain that they have. And this slide is also for me to try to make sure that they understand that this pain is part of the journey. It's kind of the rite of passage, the pain that it takes when you move from one state to the next, and the loneliness and irritation and feeling of chaos that appears. I have no idea whether they'll like that message or not, but I do see a lot of our customers having employees in that state where they think, why on earth are we doing that? It's utter chaos here. We don't want that. And maybe it's going to help them understand better how that works. Niels and Silke actually, in their new book, they have a 70-day method, I'd call that, like the open space beta, which is also the name of the book. And like they'll prepare an open space meeting, do the open space meeting, have 90 days of practicing, flipping, and learning, then have another open space meeting, and then a quiet period. And those, together, it's 180 days. They form a way of helping the organization to systematically make changes and flip things. And the cool thing that I like in this, and I'm planning to spread a couple of books of Niels and Silke during my talk, is the idea of having this 90-day period of just trying out, maybe with a small group of salespeople, how they will behave and how their performance will be if I just switch from a bonus to a fixed payment, for example. and then maybe they get what they would have gotten in bonuses in the last quarter, in this quarter as a fixed payment, and then now they run, and then let's see whether they'll still sell, whether they sell better, worse, what improves, and what's going to get worse. And I like the idea of this 90-day experiment because you can roll it back afterwards, and it's a very good. Lars Former calls those labore, which is a lab, a experiment area where the organization can then, you have to have a protection shield for them, but within this protection shield, now the organization can watch people behave without those rules that the organization thinks are crucial. And now you see out there's a lot of companies who don't use those rules. And now for a 90-day period, you can try out how it would work without those rules. And maybe you'll find out, as those other companies, that it's better. Then the organization will be inclined to do another experiment that is then maybe a bit bigger. And in a couple of years or months, you may have abandoned this toxic practice. Then this is actually something that derived directly from the survey. Like all of the following slides actually came from like people asking for, give us tips and examples of how we can behave. And so the first thing that I had is stop whining. It's like people who cry, they should stop. They should not create a negatively connotated attention activity. So if you whine, people look at you and it looks bad, like the bird in this picture. Not very pretty. You can criticize things in a constructive way. You can say what is bullshit and call it like this if it's clear that you're criticizing for the sake of the company. No one will ever criticize you for criticizing something that will improve the company. So that's okay. That's not whining. Whining is, oh, why is everyone behaving like this? Or I don't know, why is everyone so stupid? And the bad thing about whining is it creates simple solutions. And the problem is, as we've understood earlier, there's a difference between the blue, the robot, and the red, the complex, the people. And simple solutions only work for blue problems. But this agile transition is a red problem. It's complex. A simple solution won't do. So stop whining to make sure that you don't get simple solutions implemented. You don't want a short-term pay raise. You want to be participating in the overall profits of the company as employees. And like, that's maybe just a small example, but yeah, that's one tip. Actually, and then like there's also an upside and downside. And if your job has a lot of downsides, most situations in a good environment, economic environment, will mean that the payments that you get will be good. Because if you have a bad job, payment has to be good. For Seibert Media, at least our employees, do think that the job is cool, but the payment is bad. Which is also like one explanation could be that we can afford not to pay as much as others because the job is so cool. So if you're whining about your own job, think about your payment as well. Because if you get a better job, you may get a worse payment. It's, don't get me wrong, I'm not happy that this is the case here, but it's also a valid explanation of you can look at the bright side of things instead of always looking at the things that need to improve. And then another tip that I have for people is don't be a marble in the marble run where click, clock, click, clock, your marble only goes like the predetermined way. This is how an insurance company envisions the work of processing insurance cases. And as cool of a picture this may be, it's absolutely outdated. No one needs that. Like this click clack thing in the insurance company business, it can be automated. What insurances need tomorrow is creativity, is the ability to work on complex things. And what you can do as an individual employee, even if there's no agility in your business yet, is you can break out. You can break the rules and make your own calls. There's just one rule that you have to follow if you break rules internally. It must be for the better of your company. If you break a rule, you can never break a rule to get an advantage for yourself. If you do that, you're going to be punished. For everything else, large organizations are unable to punish you. It's in my opinion, it's a fact that those big companies that they are totally unable to put sanctions on people who break rules. They can only do it if they break rules for their own personal advantage. If they break rules to improve the company, there's no sanction, or maybe they'll raise a finger and say, don't do it again. But that's actually something that will help the organization to be irritated and to be thinking about stuff. So why is he doing that? Oh, actually, he's trying to help us. Why is he trying to help us breaking this rule? Why do we have this rule after all? It's it's not a, you can't use it all the time for everything, but it's wisely used, something that will help you change stuff even in a command and control environment. The next thing is about trust versus control, where you can think about like basically the answer why I put the slide up is I want employees to question themselves. Is this process, is this work, is this activity that the company is asking me to do, is that designed in a way where the creators of this process trust me to take my own decision and to use my brains, and do I have freedom to use this? Or is it more in a way that they try to control me wherever they can to let me document everything so that I can't do any mistakes and errors, to make sure that everything is revision proof, and like where in a command and control environment, processes become like the vehicle that the organization tries to use to employ control, and that feels like a lot of bureaucracy to people. And once you feel that, you can call it out now, because your company wants to become agile, right? So if your company wants to become agile, they have to drop this control shit. They have to make sure that employees can make their own calls in the favor of the company, obviously. And the creative process here as an employee is to make constructive suggestions on how you can loosen the process and still make sure that compliance is high enough so that you don't have damages. And that's where we come back to the Werder-Fass board or authority board, where you have topics, and then you can say who can make the decision, who's going to consult with them, and where the information should be put. So one of the things that Agile needs is transparency. So where the information needs to be put is, at least for us in our Werder-Fass board, very important. And for those people who want to break rules, I would recommend to the other one, the opposite one as well, where you you can say who is sanctioning what. Like, what are the things that you can break, or the rules that you could not follow, and what will happen if you do. And it's obviously something that you can only use as a tactic as an employee or a group, but still having such a matrix is probably going to help you understand for your organization which rules can I break, and what is the sanction that I have to fear, and is there any sanction, and if so, what is it, and who is the decision taker on that. And something about purpose. It's a picture of today, actually. I've taken this picture of Tilman, one of our employees, and he gave me a very short video. It's a German video, so it doesn't help a lot to play this here. But I'm basically asking him, why are you wearing this ugly poster? And he's wearing that when he comes to work and when he gets back. And he says, because I'm convinced that the purpose of this party this European party that I'm proposing on those posters, that this is worthwhile making a fool of out of myself. And then I'm asking him, like, did he invent that? And he said, no, it was contagious. I was seeing that with others and thought it was a good idea, so I'm doing it myself. And I think it's a very good thing of, I cut out this stuff, but I've been talking about him, whether he did this with Seibert Media, and he came up with a couple of things that he said initially out of my comfort zone. I didn't want to do it, but then I did it because I believed in it would help Seibert Media a lot. And I think that especially why I put this up as well here is for this insurance company, when I looked at Kununu, which is something like Glassdoor in USA, like a place where employees can review their employers. And the one thing that this insurance company has is interesting tasks. That's what people say. It's one out of 14 criteria or categories that people can review them. And obviously, people do believe in the work that they are doing in this insurance company, and they can really leverage that, in my opinion. So I'm just seeing that this is a long presentation. I may want to kick a couple of slides out. Let's see. So one of the problems that I see that employees and also like management does in organizations is I've called that worst case fever here. They're always thinking of worst case scenarios. What could happen? What would happen if everyone did that? And so my call is try to think of stuff that will help you leverage chances that you have. Like, think in possibilities, think in probabilities, think in things that can happen, and attach a probability to them, and then see how likely stuff is. I think it's a very good case in an insurance company to do that, because an insurance company always is thinking in probabilities, right? And they make calls. It's their business to make calls on those probabilities. So we want to insure stuff that never happens, but people are willing to pay for insuring themselves that if this happens, they are covered. And embracing this thinking into business will help employees and management to make better calls, and also to try out stuff, to do experiments. As an employee, you obviously have to learn to say no. This is nothing that is truly new for Agile, but there's a lot of things that employees can do to make sure that their boundaries are met. And one thing that I have seen with a guy whom I met in the past, it was very interesting. Like, he was driving in a car, I was sitting on the passenger seat, and he was going through a red light, and then he was flashed. And I said, "Oh, it's not that important. We're not in a rush." I said, "Oh, that's no problem. I'm gonna take a day off to make up for the fees that the city will put on me for flashing me on this red light." I was completely struck by the emotionless thing. Like, when I hit a red light and I'm flashed, I don't know, it would be something that would keep me occupied for a couple of minutes at least, and raise my blood pressure probably for cursing at myself doing it and so on. And he was completely calm. And the I really detest the way that he thought I'll take off, because I have to say, like, this guy was employed by the city. So his reasoning was, if I take a day off, the city will pay me this day, and with this payment, I'll pay the ticket, um, which is not a reasonable and justified way. But what I think, what is helpful in this, is he was using the means that he had to keep calm. So he wouldn't let the what happened let it raise his blood pressure or give him a bad emotion or make him angry or whatever. He had his somewhat flawed reasoning, but he kept calm and in control of the whole situation. And that's something that I would recommend to people when they try to make agile work in a big company, and you find out it simply doesn't work because people behave like assholes, and they just don't live up to that agile promises for the employees. Um, you should find a way to keep calm and keep going. And if that means hurting the company or doing something, it's probably the net effect for the company is probably much better if you take a day off. And this allows you to keep on going at full speed with a high motivation. It's probably a much better situation than if you stop doing the best work that you can and just be this demotivated type of employee that everyone's complaining about. And so this slide is about giving employees the idea that there may be ways that they can find to keep themselves motivated, although things aren't the way they want it to be. And there's actually more later on that, but I mean, one very simple thing, and I probably should put it on the very first spot, because post-its and putting dots on those post-its is a pervasive thing at Seibert Media, and I see it used by all Azure companies all the time. It's making things transparent. It's making it easy to prioritize. It's a collaborative thing that you can do easily in a meeting. And if people don't do it, they should embrace it, in my opinion. And it also came because a lot of people put it in their survey. So I thought, oh, it's worthwhile reinforcing that. Trying interdisciplinary teamwork is also something that I think people should try out more. Like, especially in big companies, you have groups of specialists, and those specialists don't work together a lot cross group wise, but deliberately as an employee going in the other department and asking a different specialist for his opinion or his help is something that is highly recommended, in my opinion. Doing retrospectives is, in my opinion, a very basic core agile practice that if your team doesn't do that or your group doesn't do it, you should start doing it because it'll uncover a lot of easy potential that you can take. The only thing you need to do is to convince someone that the time invested is worthwhile. But if your company really wants to become agile, retrospectives is a simple call, I think. The next thing is get them to do learning journeys, get them to look at other companies. I hate the best practice, uh, best practicism probably, or the search of getting to know best practices by managers. And I think it's not a wise and good strategy, but it's very, very widespread. And what I also see is we do have probably in a month's time, we probably have 50 to 70 people coming to our office and getting an office tour. A lot of them are actually paying for that. And what I do see is that they come back and I meet people who say that it helped them try out stuff in their own company because they just saw that it is working in real life in our company. So those learning journeys may be something that is worthwhile. And for this insurance company, there's actually um, a Zipgate who are pretty close, and they also do those office tours, and they can go there, I think. Kanban boards is something that also came up from the survey, something that is easily to be done, can be done even in a team that is not agile at all. They can put up a board to do doing done and have the post-its move through this simple workflow. Then they do use Legal Serious Play a lot. Now we're asking for other things. I wanted to pitch the Marshmallow Challenge, which is a cool thing. I assume that people watching this will be familiar with the Marshmallow Challenge. The main thing, and that was a big misunderstanding in my opinion, also from the survey that I got, is the idea of Legal Serious Play or the Marshmallow Challenge is not for you to give you a method to use in your own daily life, but it's a means of understanding. It's helping you to understand that an iterative process, that an iterative approach will help you master complex problems much better than planning. So the idea of Lego Serious Play is not that you use Lego tomorrow in your business, but it's helping you understand that adapting to change is necessary and that doing so in very small iterative steps is the right strategy. And that's something that I want to bring across tomorrow. I want to pitch Jira for remote teams because I know that they're using Atlassian Jira internally. I also want to pitch Confluence because I know they use Confluence, and I think that they still have a pervasive use of Microsoft Word and attaching files to emails, which is a toxic behavior in my opinion. And no, it's not my opinion. I think it's a fact that it's toxic behavior. I want to suggest to them to use more group chat. I know that they do have Skype for Business, which is not a valid solution in my opinion for a group chat. There's a long list of why I think that, but what I do know is that they roll out Office 365, which has Microsoft Teams, and this can solve the group chat problem. We're using, and I use that for the screenshot here, Google Chat, which I think is much better than Microsoft Teams, but doesn't matter here. The market leader for that is obviously Slack. But like proposing any type of group chat is probably a good idea for companies who want to become more agile. Then understanding the difference between synchronous and asynchronous communication is also important in my opinion, because the shift is with better software, you can do more asynchronous communication. And you can use synchronous communication, like a meeting or a ad hoc interaction with people, to escalate stuff or de-escalate stuff that you couldn't solve asynchronously. So you start in a wiki like Confluence or in a Jira issue or in a chat. And if you find out that you can't solve the problem because it's complex, for example, then you schedule a meeting. Then you walk to the desk of someone and talk to him, but not the other way around. Like, I even hear that in our company when people say, oh, we should be sitting together talking about this. And one of the things that I regularly think is, no, we shouldn't be doing that. What we should be doing is we should be thinking about this, talking about it asynchronously in a chat, in in the wiki on Jira. And when we find which aspects of this problem we cannot solve in this asynchronous way, then we meet and then we solve this problem that is remaining. And that's, in my opinion, a big driver of a good use of your working time, and especially of this precious time that we all have when we are together in the office. Because the amount of time that we have available for communication in general is increasing, in my opinion, because people, they tend to work more, they tend to work more when they are at home or on the go because they have better mobile apps and easier ways to access data. But the precious time when we are in the office together and meet and talk to one another should be spent for those things that are most important. And this is the things that cannot be solved asynchronously. So that's the idea of this slide. Another idea is, and that's something that people can do on their own, they don't have to ask anyone for permission to that, is get away from this need to know information sharing practice. So stop hiding information. In a lot of big companies, it's called working out loud. I simply call it massive oversharing. Some other people, detestful, say it's a Facebook-like behavior, where you basically say, I'm working on this, I've accomplished that, someone may be interested in this result of this meeting or this project, and not behaving as if you should only share what other people are in need of right now, but setting out content that people can then discover later when they need it, is a very good and helpful strategy to breed an agile and transparent culture in your company. And it's also like something that is non-offensive. You can start this at any type of agile transition. And then this is the last part of my presentation, is like the agile traps that we still step in or fall into. Stuff that even Seibert Media doesn't get today, and that I would hope us to get. Like the same for everyone. Like the classic fallacy that we have today is we're trying to make our employees decide on pay raises on their own. And let me do this very simple for you. Like, let's assume you have a team of 5 people, and you give them a budget of 5K that they can distribute within the team for the next year, for example. So the result at Seibert Media will almost always be that the team decides that every team member will get 1K. So an even distribution around the whole team. It's also the simplest solution because everyone's treated the same, right? The problem is, and this is maybe not only an agile thing, it's not the right thing to do, because in all teams you have people who contribute more and others who contribute less. And if you lose the lady who's contributing the most, then the team will be much weaker than if you lose the person who's contributing a little or has less talents or whatever, however you call that. And it's a very difficult thing to decipher who is the person who should be getting a higher pay raise than the others and who should get a lower pay raise. And I'm not advocating that you should leave out 4 people and give 5K to one guy or one lady. But coming up with the even distribution is trying to circumvent the whole discussion about differences in performance in the team. And that's, in my opinion, a trap that, and to be perfectly honest, we didn't master that. Like at Seibert Media, this is still something that we have processes and decision processes that are less agile than in other areas. And that's why I put it up. Something that I also try to make sure is like, if you're not fairly treated, if this is not the right thing that people do to you, if your boss is an asshole, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to quit the job or that you lose your motivation and don't work for the company with full throttle anymore. Something that is a good strategy, in my opinion, is to develop an ambiguity for or a tolerance for ambiguity. So you can enjoy the effectiveness of your work and the way how you and the people that are working with you in the right way, how you advance the company, and be treated unfairly at the same time. And this is something that is, in my opinion, pretty difficult to master, like to be happy while your boss is stealing your reputation or your results and selling it as if he had done it. But at the same time, is like, if your job is your boss is promoted away, it's probably also something that is not bad for you because you won't have to bear him anymore, and maybe you're going to be in his seat then and can do things better. But like focusing on the work is a good strategy, even if you're not rewarded for your work the way you think you should be. And it may sound cheesy, but it's, in my opinion, something that embracing that is helping your motivation a lot, especially in a big company where there's always happening business bullshit. And then simplifying things ex post is also something that we still fall in this trap, where people approach me, for example, and ask me, why on earth did we behave this stupidly? Couldn't anyone think about this problem one time before and then we wouldn't have to do it at all? Like, if we would plan a little more, we wouldn't have to employ such stupid behavior. And in almost all cases, it's like with the mule and the smart guy, it's a simplification of things ex post. Like when you look at things later, decisions seem to be very, very simple. Like founding Amazon or creating this Google search engine sounds like a very simple idea, and probably is a very simple idea. But doing it at the right time and being able to actually do it at that time, that's probably something that is pretty hard. And you also have to have a lot of serendipity to do it. So beware of making or having simple explanations for stuff that happened in the past. So you may be in oversight of a lot of things. What you can also do as an employee is you can just stop doing things. We had this list that we've been, and for a lot of things, like let's assume you would have to do an performance review of your employee once a year. if you could have individual bonuses and targets for an employee. Um, and those two things, you can make yourself very, or you can make it a very simple theater script if you accept that this is only business theater. If you understand and accept that this is only business theater that doesn't add value to your value creation process in the company, you can just, for example, have the solution for this bonus of this employee up front. You tell them, look, this is what we're going to put up as goals. This is how you're going to reach those goals. So basically, this is going to become a fixed payment for you. And now let's work. Let's work on the things that the customers actually need and ignore this business theater. And it's something that I do see people do already. And it's probably not a sustainable tactic because the sustainable tactic would be that the company would just abandon the bonuses. But as long as they can't, or they don't think it's the time when they'll tackle that, or maybe they even think that an agile company can work with individual bonuses and targets, you can just play your role in the business theater. And that's at least something that I think is a smart idea to do. Then the next thing is about tribal leadership, David Logan, where it's probably a slide that I'm going to kill because this is probably mostly for managers and not for people. The idea is, David Logan says, in tribal leadership, you have to make sure that your communication is adjusted and adapted to the target group that you're looking at. Like if they're in phase one, you can't come up and say, look, we have this awesome vision and those values for a company, because people think that life sucks and they simply don't care. So wherever people are in this tribal leadership phase, you have to make sure that you address the problems that they have in this phase. It's a very smart thing, but still not for employees. So I'm going to kick the slide in German version. This could be helpful, like all of those type indicators like HBDI or MBTI or insights discovery. I'm actually personally not very convinced that this is helping me and my personal style, but it's definitely helpful to understand that individuals, people, they conceive messages that you send them differently. So some people will find something polite that other people find offensive, and understanding that yourself is helping you addressing them correctly. Then there's also something that I put up for because it came up in the survey a lot. Like if you're doing experiments, and you should be doing experiments. You should be doing experiments in your group, in your team, in your business unit, in the company as a whole. And doing experiments involves risk, and it involves the risk of not being successful. And people who fail, they may not be stigmatized or punished for failing, because if you do that, experiments and experimentation in general will die off directly. That's also true for you should not ask for who's to blame, but what can be done to make sure that this error doesn't happen again. That's probably something that is not very agile, but as this is close to experiments, I put this up as well. Okay, and then the last is I have a list of books that I recommend. Some of them are actually in English. It doesn't have to be crazy at work, from David Hansen and Jason Fried, the founders of Basecamp, Conscious Capitalism, Give and Take, Remote, Turn the Ship Around. There's a lot of English books actually in this list, so you can use that directly as well if you want. And then that's the last slide. So much for these slides. I can't see how long this took, but it's a long video. So Let's see how that is conceived with the community. If you feel this helped you, please give me a comment. If you feel this was way too long and didn't help at all, please also comment on that. Hopefully, before you leave the site to do something more appropriate for you. Getting this feedback would be very helpful for me. So if you've watched the whole thing and found it helpful, that would be a strong ask that I have for you. Please give me feedback so that I know that this is worthwhile an effort, because it's also taken my time. And if it's not helpful, uh, I'll probably discontinue. Um, yeah, thanks for listening in, and bye bye.